Hey guys, this is Gamer Nation with another Yu-Gi-Oh deck profile. This time we will be showing off my wife's Fluffal deck. Keep in mind this is before the release of Fight for Patchwork, which completely turbos this deck up a lot. So until then, this is what we're going to run with. First off, we have 3 Edgem Sabers. This one allows us to get it into most of our fusion plays. It can revive itself out of the graveyard, same way that Plague Spreader does, and it actually sets up with some combos later on with a spell card. Next up is Edgem Chain. Now, while he's not used for as many of the fusions as Sabers is, he does add some pretty good effects. If he attacks, you can get another copy of himself from the deck to the hand, but no one really attacks with him. It's more important of his graveyard effect. When it's sent to the graveyard, it can search out a copy of any Frightfur card. Frightfur Factory, Patchwork, and most importantly, Fusion. So that's the end of the Edgems. Next up are the actual stuffed animals themselves. Fluffal Dog. He is your go-to search. He will search for any Fluffal monster you have in your deck or any Edgem Sabers that you have left in there. There are a few combos with him to recycle him. Next up is 3 copies of Fluffal Wings. This lets you essentially go plus very easily in this deck. You will always be able to draw and search because of the combo done with him. Next up, 2 copies of one of the new cards, Fluffal Penguin. Now, what happens is when this card is used for fusion, it turns into a mini Graceful Charity. And it also has another effect that during the main phase, you can actually special summon another Fluffal monster. So you can actually combo him in with a few other things in this deck to actually make him really, really good. Next up, 2 copies of Fluffal Bear. If you tribute him while he's on the field, you search a poly. No one really does that. What you really use him for is a discard effect to search your toy vendor and set it on your side of the field, which sets you up for your draw combos. Fluffal Sheep is the next one in 2. Now, one of the easiest combos to play is Summon Dog, use his effect to search, use Sheep to special summon itself, return Dog back to your hand so it's protected so you can search again, and summon out an Edgem from either hand or graveyard. So Sheep is actually a really versatile monster. Next up is 2 copies of Fluffal Owl. When it's summoned onto the field, you can search for polymerization. If you happen to be out of polys, he has another effect that if you didn't use the first effect, you can pay 500 and he will be treated as polymerization, using himself obviously as part of the fusion. Now the next up are the one-ofs of the deck. So the next thing is 1 copy of Fluffal Rabbit. When it's used for a fusion, get Edgem Sabers or a Fluffal monster back from your graveyard into your hand. Fluffal Cat, a similar effect, except it returns a polymerization. Both can be used in tandem with each other to return materials to your hand to extend your plays. This one's an iffy on its number. You have 1 copy of Fluffal Octopus, or Octo as everyone calls him. Now, when this card is normal or special summon, you get to pluck something back out of your graveyard and add it back to your hand. Its secondary effect is when it's used for a fusion, it actually returns up to 2 banished cards from your graveyard, from your banished pile back to your graveyard. A lot of people, what you could do is recycle your Fluffal Wings and the Fluffal to continue your draw and search combos. And the generic monster that we run as the last one is 1 King of the Swamps. Discard to search for a poly, or use it to substitute itself for Chain. So with this card, you're essentially running 4 copies of Polymerization and 4 copies of Edgem Sabers. And that is the monster lineup. Next up is the spell lineup. Probably one of the single most important cards in this deck is the copies of Toy Vendor. Now, this will let you fuel your graveyard, possibly special summon off the reveal, let you draw 2 cards, and search an Edgem Sabers or a Fluffal out of it, all off of this 1 card. Easiest combo, send Bear from hand to graveyard to play Toy Vendor, send Fluffal Wings to reveal, doesn't matter what you get, banish Wings and Bear to draw a card, pop Toy Vendor to draw a card, Toy Vendor then searches another card, all off of that one play. Next up is 3 copies of Fright for Fusion. So what this is essentially, it's Miracle Fusions for demon stuffed animals. Okay? It's searchable in this deck, it is recyclable in this deck, and it's just too good not to use. You better be running it. Next up is 3 copies of Polymerization, generic fusion card, can be searched in this deck very easily, and it lets you just make stupid monsters that just make your opponent cry. Now, next up is something that not many people know about, is Dark Fusion, 2 copies of that. So when this card first came out, it was only used for evil heroes because they were the only good Fiend fusion monsters. Now, thanks to Fluffals, you could use it for Frightfur monsters, and it makes Frightfurs hexproof for the turn. So they are essentially a 1-turn Magispector. Next up, just a generic card, 2 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon. We were toying around between this or Twin Twister. Mystical Space Typhoon ends up working better, mainly because you don't want to lose hand advantage no matter what in this deck, and MST has targets on your field, being Toy Vendor or even the next card, which is Frightfur Factory. Now what this does is it can banish any Frightfur card. Sorry, let me rephrase that. It can banish any card with the word Fusion in its name or Polymerization, and then Frightfur Factory can be treated as Polymerization for the turn. It has another effect though. If this card is sent from field to graveyard, you can actually return 1 banished Frightfur Fusion back to your hand. So it is pretty good to set up for the next turn. This way you can go into a winning board. You can usually MST your own board or use one of your fusions to pop. Next up is a card that not many people know about, Flash Fusion. Now it's a quick play, which lets you use the cards on your field to fuse. Easiest combo is to go into Sabretooth, Revive Sabers, attack, Flash Fusion, back into the Sabretooth, bring back the same Tiger, and attack 2 more times. It's essentially one of your easiest ways to win the game. And the last spell card you run is 1 copy of Dark Hole. It's a field wipe. We don't have a copy of Regeki for this deck, so Dark Hole has to do. Your Sabretooth, if used with 3 materials, will survive Dark Hole, so it will leave your opponent at a big disadvantage. Now the last thing is the extra deck, which is up to debate depending on the player. This is a fusion-based deck, so we don't actually run Exceeds in this one. First up is 3 copies of Sabretooth. So when you use a Frightfur monster and any other 2 Fluffal or Edge Imps, he becomes indestructible. He can still be targeted and bounced. You have to keep that in mind. He gives all Frightfurs a 400-point boost, and he brings back a Frightfur out of the graveyard. So in combo with the next one, Frightfur Tiger uses Edge Imp Sabers and any number of Fluffal monsters. You get to destroy cards up to the amount of fusion materials, and your Frightfur monsters get a 300-point boost for every Frightfur and Fluffal in play. So just with a combo between him and him, these 2 will go up total by 1,000. So imagine just having anything else in play. Next up is another one of the new cards, is Frightfur Kraken. So he's probably one of the best designed fusion monsters you can ask for. He's a generic fusion, so any Edge Up and any Fluffal will go into him. He can send any monster your opponent controls to the graveyard, so it gets a round destruction effects. If he uses that effect, he can't attack directly, but he can still attack. And speaking of which, he can attack up to 2 per turn. And then after battle, just like Dante, he can be shifted to defense mode. 2,200 attack isn't a lot, but with things to boost him up, it's fine. His defense, though, is 3 grand, so solid wall after he attacks. Next up, it's 2 copies of Frightfur Sheeps. So this is the only one that Chain is actually here for. Now, when this attacks, nothing can respond. Nothing will happen. If it's destroyed by your opponent's card effect or battle for any reason, it comes back 800 points stronger. So it starts at 2,000, it'll max out at 28, not including what Sabretooth or Tiger can do. Next up, the whole point of Fluffals right now is the way it's built is a go second and then OTK, and that's done with Fright for Wolf. Essentially, what you do is you play Poly, use Fright for Tiger, clear the field, go into Fright for Fusion using the same materials that you just sent to the graveyard for Wolf, attack directly, and it's game over. Next up is one copy of Fright for Bear. You very rarely go into it, but there are situations where you need him just to make sure certain monsters do not hit your opponent's graveyard, or stay in there, I should say. Next up, one copy of Fright for Leo. It's possible to bring this out because King of the Swamp will be treated as Edgem Saw. It has a great effect to blow up an opponent's monster and deal them damage. It can't attack directly, but it can still attack. And the last card is something most people don't see in here, is Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. Now, he's just really easy to be brought out. You can bring him out in Flash Fusion in the middle of your opponent's turn to defend, negate thing if he goes, special summon monster your opponent feels go. He's a solid 2,800, so it's a good little tech card to run in. There is no side deck for this deck right now. It's still in the works, but for now, this is what we have to go off of. So tell us what you think in the comments below, and have a good night, guys.